Alina sat in the back of the black limousine, her hands trembling in her lap as she clutched the edge of her white wedding gown. The fabric, delicate and expensive, felt heavy against her skin like a cage trapping her in a life she had never wanted. Her face was wet with tears, but she tried to wipe them away before anyone could see. Cameras had flashed all night, reporters whispering about the young, beautiful bride marrying one of the wealthiest men in America, Robert Langston, a 78-year-old billionaire, her husband. Alina shuddered at the thought. She was only 22. She had dreamed of love, passion, a man who would hold her close at night and whisper sweet promises into her ear. Instead, she had been sold to a man old enough to be her grandfather. Her mother had wept tears of joy, her father had shaken hands with Robert like they had struck gold, and her younger siblings had clapped without understanding that their sister was being sacrificed for their survival. Robert had paid off all their debts. Their house, which was on the verge of foreclosure, was now secure. Her mother's medical bills were covered. Her father was no longer drowning in loans, all because she had agreed to marry him. But at what cost? Alina squeezed her hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. The limousine glided through the iron gates of Robert's mansion, a monstrous estate that looked more like a palace than a home. The tall marble columns loomed in the dim lights, casting long shadows on the driveway. As the car came to a stop, the driver stepped out and opened the door. Cold air rushed in, making her shiver. Or maybe it wasn't the cold. Maybe it was the fear. Robert stepped out first, his aged hands gripping the car door as he moved slowly. He turned to her and held out his hand. "Come, my dear," he said, in his deep, gravelly voice. Alina hesitated, then placed her trembling hand in his. His skin was cold, his grip strong despite his age. She forced a smile, knowing that cameras might still be watching. The world loved a beautiful bride marrying a billionaire, whether they believed it was true love or not. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. The air smelled of polished wood, expensive cologne, and something else, something unfamiliar and unsettling. The butler gave them a small nod before disappearing down the hallway, leaving them alone. Alina's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment she had been dreading since she signed her name on that marriage contract. Robert turned to her, his pale blue eyes watching her carefully. "Let me show you to your room," he said. She swallowed. "My room?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Did you think you'd be sharing a bed with me?" Alina's breath caught in her throat. That was exactly what she had thought. That was what she had feared. "You're young, Alina," he continued, leading her up the grand staircase. "I know this. Marriage isn't what you wanted. I won't force you into anything you don't want." She blinked, trying to process his words. "Then why did you marry me?" They reached the top of the stairs, and he paused, turning to look at her fully. "I have my reasons," he said simply. Then he continued walking. Alina followed, confusion swirling in her mind. He stopped in front of a door and pushed it open, revealing a luxurious bedroom. The walls were lined with soft cream wallpaper. The bed was massive, with gold-trimmed sheets, and the windows overlooked the vast garden outside. "This is your room," Robert said. "You can decorate it however you like." She hesitated in the doorway. "And you?" "I have my own room." He smiled slightly. "You are my wife, Alina, but I have no intention of being your husband in any way you don't want." Her heart pounded. Was this a trick? Some kind of test? "Then why did you marry me?" she asked. Again, he sighed. "Sleep now. We'll talk tomorrow." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, utterly shocked. This was not what she had expected at all. Alina stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the empty hallway where Robert had disappeared. The silence in the mansion was deafening. This wasn't how she had imagined her first night as a married woman, certainly not with a billionaire husband. She had expected the worst, prepared herself for an unbearable night of pretending. But instead, he had left her alone. Slowly, she stepped into her new bedroom, running her fingers over the polished wooden furniture. The room was beautiful, lavish beyond anything she had ever known, but it felt hollow. She sat on the edge of the massive bed, her hands resting on the silk sheets. The fabric was cool under her fingertips, and for the first time in days she allowed herself to breathe. Maybe this wouldn't be as terrible as she thought. Robert was old, very old. Maybe he truly had no interest in being a husband in the way men usually were. Maybe he had just wanted a young, beautiful woman by his side for appearances. Rich men did that all the time, didn't they? But something didn't feel right. His words kept echoing in her head. I have my reasons. What reasons? A shiver ran down her spine. She decided not to dwell on it tonight. Her body was exhausted, her mind overwhelmed, and for now, the only thing she wanted was sleep. She pulled off the heavy wedding dress and changed into a silk nightgown that had been left for her. It felt expensive, too expensive for a girl who had spent her whole life wearing second-hand clothes. Sliding under the sheets, she stared at the ceiling, her mind swirling with thoughts. Her family was safe now. That was what mattered. Even if her life felt like it didn't belong to her anymore. She forced her eyes shut, willing herself to sleep. She woke with a start. Something was wrong. The room was pitch black, but she could hear breathing, not hers, someone else's. Her body went rigid. She wasn't alone. Slowly, she turned her head toward the door. The faint glow of moonlight barely illuminated the figure standing in the shadows. Her breath hitched. It was Robert. He was just standing there, watching her. A chill crawled down her spine. Robert, she whispered, her voice shaky. He didn't respond. He didn't move. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She gripped the blanket tighter, her heart racing. Is something wrong? She tried again. Silence. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable, he said, his voice eerily calm. Alina swallowed hard. I am fine. He nodded slowly, but he didn't leave. He stood there for a few more moments, his face unreadable in the darkness. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, shutting the door softly behind him. Alina didn't move. Her entire body was stiff with fear. What the hell had just happened? She didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Something was very, very wrong with Robert Langston. Alina spent the rest of the night lying still, wide awake, staring at the door. Her body was frozen in fear, every muscle tense. Why had Robert been watching her? The way he stood there, silent, unmoving, it wasn't normal. It wasn't the harmless old man act he had put on earlier. Something about it sent ice through her veins. Was he testing her, trying to see if she would react? When the first light of morning peeked through the curtains, Alina finally allowed herself to move. She slipped out of bed cautiously, her heart still pounding. Everything in the room looked normal. No signs that anything had happened. Maybe she had imagined, maybe she was overthinking. But deep down, she knew she wasn't. She quickly changed into the simple yet elegant dress that had been laid out for her. It was clear Robert had spared no expense in making sure she looked like the perfect billionaire's wife. But as she stared at herself in the mirror, she felt like a stranger in her own skin. A knock at the door startled her. She sucked in a breath. Before opening it, a maid stood there, her head slightly bowed. She was a middle-aged woman, her uniform crisp, her expression unreadable. Good morning, Mrs. Langston, the maid said. Mr. Langston is waiting for you in the dining room. Alina hesitated. The thought of seeing Robert again made her stomach twist, but she couldn't avoid him forever. Thank you, she said softly. The maid gave a small nod and stepped aside. As Alina walked through the enormous house, she tried to calm herself. Maybe last night had been nothing. Maybe Robert was just old and strange, and she was letting her fear get the best of her. The dining room was massive, like something out of a royal palace. A long, dark wood table stretched nearly the entire length of the room, covered with expensive silverware and crystal glasses. The chandeliers above sparkled in the morning light. Robert sat at the head of the table, reading a newspaper. He looked up when she entered, smiling like nothing had happened. Good morning, my dear. I trust you slept well? Alina hesitated, her mind flashing back to the dark figure standing in her room. She forced a smile. Yes, he nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. Sit, eat. She took a seat across from him, her eyes scanning the lavish breakfast spread in front of her: fresh fruit, eggs, toast, bacon, pastries, and more. She wasn't hungry, but she picked at a piece of toast, not wanting to raise suspicion. Robert watched her carefully. Are you settling in well? Yes, she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. There was a long pause. Then he folded his newspaper and set it aside. Alina, I imagine you're wondering why I married you. Her fingers tightened around her fork. Yes, He leaned back in his chair, studying her. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this is some great love story. I know you didn't marry me for love. Alina's breath hitched, but she said nothing. But I didn't marry you for love either, he continued. I married you because I needed to. A chill crept down her spine. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, but there was something unsettling about it. Because, my dear, you remind me of someone. Her stomach dropped. Before she could ask who, he stood up, taking his cup of coffee with him. Enjoy your breakfast. Then, just like that, he walked out of the room. Alina sat frozen, her heart pounding. Who did she remind him of? And why did the thought make her feel like she had just stepped into a nightmare? Alina sat motionless at the dining table, her toast untouched, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. You remind me of someone. Robert's words echoed in her head, leaving her unsettled. Who? A past lover? A wife? Someone dead? Her stomach twisted. Something wasn't right. She needed to know more. Taking a deep breath, she pushed her chair back and stood up. The mansion was eerily quiet as she stepped into the long corridor. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but the air inside the house felt cold, lifeless. She needed answers. Her first thought was to ask the staff. Surely someone knew about Robert's past. But as she passed a group of maids in the hallway, they quickly lowered their heads, avoiding eye contact. It was like they were afraid to speak to her. A shiver ran down her spine. She wandered through the endless hallways, her fingers trailing along the cold marble walls. She passed paintings of landscapes, expensive vases, and doors leading to rooms she hadn't yet explored. Then she stopped. At the end of the hallway was a single door. Unlike the others, this one was slightly ajar. Something about it pulled her in. Heart pounding, she slowly pushed it open. The room inside was dimly lit, the heavy curtains drawn. He studied her, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he said quietly, yes. Alina felt the air leave her lungs. Her fingers curled tightly around the photograph, her knuckles turning white. You remind me of her, Robert continued, stepping closer. The way you move, the way you speak. The first time I saw you, I thought I was seeing a ghost. Alina took a step back, her heart hammering. I'm not Evelyn, she whispered. I'm not her. Robert's lips pressed into a thin line. I know, he said, but that doesn't change anything. A shiver ran down Alina's spine. She felt trapped, like a butterfly caught in a spider's web. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Robert tilted his head slightly. That depends on you, my dear, he said. Will you be my wife, or will you try to run? The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Alina knew one thing for certain: she was in danger. He walked to the vanity, picked up a different photograph, and stared at it for a long moment. She was my first love, he finally said, his voice distant, as if he was speaking to a ghost. We met when we were young. I built this empire for her. She was everything to me. Alina felt a cold sweat forming on her back. What happened to her? She asked, barely able to keep her voice steady. Robert's hand tightened around the picture frame. She died in this house. Alina's blood ran cold. How? He turned his head slightly, his pale blue eyes locking onto hers. She drowned in the lake behind the estate. Alina sucked in a sharp breath. Drowned? Robert nodded. It was an accident. A storm hit that night, and she was out walking alone. She must have slipped. Something about the way he said it made Alina's stomach twist. His face was composed, but there was something in his voice, something that felt off. Why didn't you ever remarry? She asked hesitantly. He smiled, but it was empty, because no one ever came close to her. Alina felt her hands go cold. Until now. Until her. Robert reached out and tucked a loose strand of her hair behind her ear. She fought the urge to recoil. You remind me of her in so many ways, he murmured. Alina forced a weak smile. That's strange, isn't it? His eyes darkened slightly, as if he were lost in a memory. Perhaps she needed to get out of that room. Excuse me, she said quickly, stepping away. I think I need some air. Robert didn't stop her. He simply watched as she hurried past him, leaving the room behind as fast as she could without running. Her mind was racing. She needed to find out more. because deep down, she knew Evelyn's death wasn't an accident. And if she wasn't careful, she might suffer the same fate. Alina's hands shook as she gripped the cold marble railing of the grand staircase, her breath uneven. The mansion suddenly felt suffocating, its towering walls closing in on her. Evelyn drowned in the lake. An accident, Robert had said. But Alina didn't believe him. She could still feel the way he had looked at her, the strange mixture of nostalgia and something darker. He wasn't in love with her. He was in love with a ghost. And that terrified her. She needed answers. She hurried through the mansion, trying not to draw attention to herself. The staff had been avoiding her all morning, but there had to be someone who would talk. Then she spotted her maid, one of the older women who had been there since the wedding. Her graying hair was tied back in a tight bun, her uniform pristine. She was arranging flowers in a tall vase, her hands moving quickly. Alina approached her cautiously. "Excuse me," she said softly. The woman flinched slightly, but quickly masked her reaction, turning to face her with a forced smile. "Yes, Mrs. Langston?" Alina hesitated, then decided to get straight to the point. "I need to know about Evelyn." The maid's eyes widened. Her hands froze over the flowers. Alina took a step closer. "Please," she whispered. "I need to know the truth." The woman's throat bobbed as she swallowed nervously. She glanced around the hallway before lowering her voice. She was beautiful, the maid murmured. "Kind, gentle." Alina waited, but then something changed after she married Mr. Langston. The woman added, her voice barely above a whisper. Alina's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" The maid swallowed hard. She wasn't happy here. She tried to leave once. Alina's blood ran cold. "Tried?" she echoed. The woman's lips parted. But before she could answer, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What are you two talking about?" Alina turned abruptly. Robert stood at the end of the hall, watching them. The maid took a quick step back, her face draining of color. "Nothing, sir," she said quickly, bowing her head. Robert's eyes locked onto Alina. He didn't need to say anything, the silent warning was clear. Alina forced a smile. "Just asking about the flowers." Robert held her gaze for a long moment before nodding. "Come with me, my dear. I have a surprise for you." Alina's skin crawled, but she had no choice. She followed him down the long, winding hallways, every step making her stomach twist tighter. Then she realized where they were going, the back of the estate, toward the lake. Panic surged through her. Her heart slammed against her ribs as the lake came into view. The water was eerily still, dark and endless. Robert gestured toward it. "This is where Evelyn died." Alina didn't move. "I thought you might want to see it," he continued, watching her carefully, her hands clenched at her sides. She needed to stay calm. She turned to him slowly. "Do you miss her?" she asked. Robert's lips curled into a small smile. "Every day." The air between them felt charged, suffocating. Alina took a slow step back. She had a chance to slip away unnoticed. Moving quickly through the mansion, she made her way toward the west wing, the part of the house that felt the most forgotten. If Evelyn had left anything behind, it would be there. She reached the end of a dimly lit hallway, where a heavy wooden door stood slightly ajar. Pushing it open, she stepped inside. Dust motes swirled in the air, illuminated by the soft morning light filtering through tall arched windows. The room was eerily still. It must have been Evelyn's at some point. Alina's heart pounded as she took in the space: an old vanity covered in dust, a wardrobe standing slightly open, and a writing desk tucked against the far wall. Her fingers trembled as she opened the desk drawers, sifting through old papers, dried up ink bottles, and broken quills. Then, at the very back, she found a small leather-bound journal. Alina's breath caught. She carefully pulled it out, wiping away the layer of dust. The leather was cracked with age, the pages slightly yellowed. As she opened it, Evelyn's delicate handwriting filled the pages, the ink slightly faded but still legible. Her pulse quickened as she flipped through the entries, each word a glimpse into the life of the woman who had come before her. Then she found the last entry. Her blood ran cold. "I know now that I must leave. I cannot stay here any longer. Robert is not the man I thought he was. He watches me constantly, follows me." I tried to tell the maid, but she is too afraid. "If something happens to me, know this: I did not slip. I did not fall. If I am found in the lake, he put me there." Alina's hands shook. Evelyn hadn't drowned by accident. She had been murdered, and Now, history was repeating itself. He left for one of his mysterious business calls before slipping away. She retraced her steps from before, heading back to the room with Evelyn's portrait. But this time she searched carefully: the vanity, the drawers, the closet. Then, in the back of the wardrobe, hidden behind old dresses, she found it. A small leather-bound journal. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was elegant, but the words inside made her stomach drop. I don't trust him anymore. I hear footsteps at night. I feel eyes on me even when I'm alone. Alina's breath quickened. She flipped through the pages. He doesn't love me. He loves a memory. And when I tried to leave, the sentence stopped abruptly. The last pages were ripped out. A chill ran down Alina's spine. She now knew the truth. Evelyn hadn't just drowned, she had been silenced. And if Alina didn't escape soon, she would be next. Alina's hands trembled as she clutched Evelyn's journal, her pulse roaring in her ears. When I tried to leave, the words haunted her. Evelyn had known something. She had tried to run and she had died. Alina swallowed the lump in her throat. She couldn't let history repeat itself. She shoved the journal into the pocket of her dress, her mind racing. If she wanted to survive, she needed to be smart, careful. She had to escape. That night, she made her plan. She would wait until Robert was asleep. Then she'd slip out of the mansion, past the iron gates, and find help. But she had to act normal first. At tea dinner, she smiled when Robert spoke, nodding at his stories of business and wealth. She played the part of the obedient wife, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, she was screaming. Robert, however, was watching her. His sharp blue eyes never left her face. Are you happy here, my dear? He asked suddenly, sipping his wine. Alina forced a smile. Of course. A long pause. Then, a slow smile crept onto his lips. Good, he said, setting his glass down, because I can't bear the thought of losing you. Alina's blood ran cold. Was that a threat? Did he know? She couldn't let fear show. She simply reached for her glass, her hands steady. I'll always be here, she lied, because tonight she was running. The mansion was silent at midnight. Alina waited in bed, fully dressed, her heart hammering in her chest. Then, when she was sure Robert was asleep, she moved. She crept to the door, slowly turning the knob. The hallway was dark, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. She tiptoed down the stairs, past the grand dining hall, past the portraits of Robert's ancestors, who seemed to watch her. She was almost at the door when a creak. Her heart stopped. She turned slowly and Robert was there, standing in the darkness, waiting. Alina's breath hitched. I was hoping you wouldn't do this, Robert said, his voice eerily calm. Her stomach dropped. He knew. He had always known. Alina's pulse skyrocketed. She turned on her heel and ran. Robert lunged for her, but she was faster. She tore through the front door, her bare feet hitting the cold pavement. She didn't look back. She ran down the long driveway, the iron gates looming in the distance. Behind her footsteps, heavy, fast. Panic surged through her veins. The gate. She just had to reach the gate. She threw herself at the metal bars, scrambling to climb. Then a hand clamped around her ankle. She screamed. Robert yanked her down, sending her crashing onto the pavement. Pain exploded through her shoulder. But she fought. She kicked, scratched, struggled. But Robert was stronger. He pinned her down, his breath ragged. I gave you everything. Everything. He hissed. Why couldn't you just stay? Alina thrashed. But his grip was ironclad. She was going to die, just like Evelyn. No. Summoning every ounce of strength, she reached into her pocket and plunged Evelyn's journal into his face. The sharp corner slammed against his temple. Robert stumbled back, stunned. That was all she needed. Alina scrambled up and threw herself at the gate's control panel. She slammed her fist against the button. The gates groaned. Open. Freedom. She bolted through, sprinting toward the road, screaming for help. Behind her, Robert stood at the entrance of the estate. He didn't chase her. He just watched, his face twisted in something between fury and heartbreak. Then before the headlights of an approaching car could reach him, he disappeared, back into the darkness. The police came. Alina told them everything, about Evelyn, about the journal, about the night she almost died. But when they searched the mansion, Robert was gone. No trace of him. No sign of struggle. Only his wedding ring, left behind on her pillow. As if it had all been a nightmare. But it wasn't, because Evelyn's journal was real. And Alina knew one thing for certain: Robert was still out there, and someday he'd come back for her.